Mm. Welcome, everyone. Welcome again. And good evening, or good afternoon, or good morning to you, wherever you are in the world. It's a treat to be practicing here together, as always. And so, as usual, for Tuesday evening, we're going to begin with a bit of guided, maybe tonight, lightly guided meditation, and then move into the Dhamma talk. And I think this evening we're just going to do a little mindfulness of breathing practice. And the key thing to know about that is that when you practice mindfulness of breathing, if you have the attention of the breathing right in the forefront of the mind, and you're sensing it in a very small area, a very precise way, that is more of a concentration building way of doing the practice. Whereas if you take a little bit larger area of where you're feeling it, or you allow the breath to just be the support for the mind to stay and have it be a little bit in the background, then that is a little bit more of mindfulness style practice. So just FYI, you might just see what it is that you typically do. Maybe you haven't thought about it in that way yet. Or you might choose one or the other. But for now, we're just going to settle into our bodies. So I often like to begin with a little bit of rocking from side to side and front to back. Maybe moving the head, just working out a little bit of tension or any tendency to lean in one direction or another. And allowing the body to come into a nice, balanced, upright posture. Relaxing the belly and allowing the body to really settle on your seat. Feeling that natural stability of the body. And allowing the muscles of the ribs and the chest to also soften and become wide and relaxed. letting the eyes also soften. And now beginning to notice the breath, breathing the body. Just finding some place where it's easy to rest the mind and the sensations of the breath. Perhaps noticing the pauses between the in-breaths and the out-breaths, between the out-breaths and the in-breaths. So nice. Just sit and enjoy the breath of this moment. Staying curious about the breath. Just receiving the sensations. Beautiful. That was our meditation practice for this evening. And so if you have any questions or any reflections on that, we can talk about that in a little while at the end after the Dhamma talk. And for now, I'm just going to transition to that part of our program. Right. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So today I'm going to be speaking about the fifth of the 7 factors of awakening. So I've been offering basically a series of talks about the 7 factors, some factors of enlightenment or some factors of awakening. In Pali, it's called bojjhanga. And it's okay if you haven't been here for all of them. We were just taking one quality at a time. And talking about one quality and a little bit about how to foster that quality or how you might see it, where you might see it. And maybe I'll do 1 or 2 talks at the very end with a more overview approach. But for now, we're going to talk about passaddhi. So just to name the 7 again, so I won't bother with the Pali words really, but so mindfulness is the first. Investigation of dhammas or investigation of principles is the second one. And then energy or effort is the third. And joy, beautiful joy, is the 4th factor. Then tonight's factor, which is calm or tranquility. And the 6th factor is samadhi, means concentration or immersion of the mind, absorption. And then lastly, equanimity. Yeah, or equipoise. Sometimes people like that one slightly better. So the 7 factors are the factors that need to be present in order for the insight into reality to actually open up for us. And there are also the factors that are present after those kinds of insights come, the attributes of someone who has had that experience. And looking at, and so one way to think about the factors is thinking of them sequentially. But also, as I've said before, much of the emphasis that we see in the suttas and the early discourses about the factors is thinking about them in terms of balance, coming to some kind of balance within the mind. So mindfulness as a factor that is useful all the time. We can't really even practice with something that we're not mindful of, that we're not actually attending to. And then the calming factors are these last 3. The first, the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th factors are the stimulating factors, and then 5, 6, 7 are the calming factors. So passaddhi is the first of our calming factors, and it means tranquility. And Tranquility specifically, so as usual, there are different ideas about the meaning of this, but if we look specifically at the discourse that I've been offering, going through here with you, which is the connected discourse number 46 from chapter 46, number 51, 46.51, which is about the nutriments, the fuel or the supports for both the hindrances, so the things that we think of as being obstacles or difficulties that prevent you from clarifying and settling the mind, and the nutriments for the awakening factors or the alignment factors. And so the nutriment in this sutta, specifically for the arising of the factor of tranquility, is tranquility of the body and tranquility of the mind. So both are involved, both in body and mind. And frequent, careful attention to them, to tranquility of body and mind, is the fuel for tranquility to arise. And so we have, similar to the situation of energy, right? We have the Buddha basically saying a little bit of calm in either the body or the mind can help to create more calm in the other one. And then there can be this kind of momentum that develops. And the frequent, careful attention. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. So Yoniso Manasikara, there's a very, very short sutta in the numbered discourses in which the Buddha says something like, the one factor that is most important in being able to develop insight is this: wise attention or appropriate attention. And that's because the nature of the mind is such that the way that we are turning our attention and the things that we're turning our attention to is what creates either more suffering and more confusion, or creates more calm and more clarity. Yeah? And so in the sutta, for example, the suggestion here about tranquility of body and mind leading to tranquility, then what does that mean? It means when you notice a little bit of relaxation happening in the body, then you're there for that. You're paying attention. And you're maybe noticing, oh, what was the condition that happened before that? Or is this new? Does it always often come at this point in the meditation? Is it something that has to do with my posture? Or maybe my mind was already feeling calm, right? I had let go of my to-do list. Aha! I had set down my to-do list for long enough that then the body started to also relax, right? Or various kinds of investigation that you might do like this, right? So really, really paying attention to those moments of relaxation when they come. Again, not in a kind of pointy way. We're not trying to unpack them particularly, because that would actually lead to more stimulation. But because investigation is one of the stimulating factors, right? But more in the sense of just being present and having a sense for, oh, okay, what's the state of the conditions that are here, so that I can start to become more familiar with that, and I can start to actually perhaps put those conditions into play more often. Yeah. So, and as I said, this process of the body and the mind, so they tend to influence each other, and we pretty much know this, right? If your mind is very agitated, it's very hard to stay still, right? It's very, very hard to stay still if there's something that's really eating at you. And And so I'll say a little bit more about that internal process in a minute. But one other thing that is often overlooked is that we also influence each other externally. So there, in fact, have been some studies done about this, that if you are within 10 feet or so of someone else and you all start meditating. So the study was this. It's a fascinating study from many years ago. I think like even in the 80s or early 90s. They put a bunch of people in a room who were not experienced meditators and basically sat them down and asked them to meditate together while they had some monitors on so that they could monitor their heart rate and their breathing. And what they noticed is that, now, why did they pick beginners? Because so there would be people who don't know how to manipulate that per se, or who don't have a habitual response to meditation. This is just, they sit down and they're learning it. And what they found was that the heart rates and the breathing rates of the people would tend to kind of come into harmony. Not exactly the same. You might be breathing twice as fast as me, for example, or something like that, but that they would start to become more harmonious physically, actually, just by being in the same room with each other and doing this practice. So this is one reason why we actually practice in person. It's very helpful to practice in person. So we have a couple of people here in the vihara today who are doing that. And we had a number of folks here for the retreat over the latter part of last week. And so I really just want to put in a big plug for that. Whether you come to the vihara or some other place, practicing in person is definitely something that can be a support, a very perhaps subtle support, but one that is helpful. So we do influence each other. And yet the other side of this equation is that one of the benefits of practice, one of the so-called fruits of practice, is that we are more independent of external agitation or external influences due to our practice. It's also a very interesting dynamic. So the example for that I want to bring is there is in the Dhammapada. So Dhammapada is one of the more well-known Buddhist teachings. It is one of the older ones, actually, we think. And some of the teachings that are here in Dhammapada are bits that were taken out of the suttas, out of the discourses, or other parts of the canon. But there are also particular things that are particular to the Dhammapada here. And this particular translation is one by Gils Fronstal, another Dhamma teacher that I know, and somebody who did this fairly contemporary, I would say, translation of the Dhammapada. There are many, many, dozens at least in English translations. But so what I wanted to read to you is Dhammapada 95, verse number 95, which says, "For a person who, like the earth, is untroubled, who is well practiced, who is like a pillar of Indra, who is like a lake without mud, there is no more wandering." So I think the lake without mud means like settled, like the water is clear. Not that there is, because at first I was sort of like, what? It has to have some mud, otherwise it's not a lake. But no, not concrete lakes, but actual like the water having settled and there's no mud in the water. So who, like the earth, is untroubled? Now this is a very interesting thing. So the way that it's said that earth represents the quality of stability or steadiness. That was one of the metaphors that's very often used in the discourses. And it's also something that we can experience. So in the first foundation of mindfulness, for example, one of the practices that is given is the elements, the meditation on the four elements, this body as four elements. And I often offer that meditation on Wednesdays when we do mindfulness of body online, the Wednesday morning meditation. Sometimes I've done it here before the Tuesday night. And the first of those 4 elements is the earth element. So you can maybe sometimes sit down and, in a sense, just become attentive to that aspect of the body. Right? So we know that every cell in the body has some degree of earth to it. This is why we're called carbon-based forms, right? We have solid matter in all of our cells. And when we sit down and we pay attention to that, so earth in the most obvious forms that we can feel in the body of that steadiness and that kind of firmness of earth is like in the teeth, in the bones, in the flesh of the body. These are the places where we can feel the earthiness of this body. Right? Or maybe you feel the weight. So oftentimes I will begin a meditation by inviting you to feel the weight of your body. That's also tuning into the earth element. So that can be a very calming practice. That can be very steadying practice. And the 4 elements tends to, in my experience anyway, the 4 elements are a very balanced practice because it goes from earth, water, fire, which represents heat, and then air. So like oxygen in all your cells, for example. So it goes from the heaviest to the lightest. It goes from the more dense to the more subtle. From the stability to the kind of spaciousness and lightness, But for our purposes, for tranquility, I would suggest that the earth element is really one that you might focus on. You don't have to do all 4 in the meditation. You can just use one. So there's that aspect of the earth. And this pillar of Indra, so this is a reference to India. And Gil gives us this footnote saying that the main column that stood at the entrance to a city, any city, presumably a city, many cities in India, with half its length buried underground. Therefore, the pillar is this metaphor for firmness, a metaphor for imperturbability. Also because the pillar is indifferent to whether you worship it or you disrespect it. And the earth was also said to be indifferent to whether you worship it or you disrespect it. So there's this benefit of the practice, which while we can remain open to influences, we can also find a steadiness amidst a very busy world, or amidst a very chaotic or agitated world. So that the finding our tranquility in the practice, finding our steadiness in the body and the mind by practicing well, by practicing with these bodies and minds persistently, I would say, over time. And however, we need to know often that stress not only comes from the world, it comes from inside of us. The stress and the agitation and that those things that are making it difficult to sit still and to allow the mind to rest are the things that are inner, not outer so much. So my example of this is, some of you have heard this story, but it's from a long time ago when I was living at Tassajara Zen Mountain Monastery out in Central California. And it's a very remote place, about 2 hours drive to the nearest gas station. And so we don't go out a lot. You stay at the monastery for a long period of time, most of the time, except in the summer. Then in the summer, we would have short-term guests. But anyway, I was there for some period of time as a resident, and I was walking back from the bathhouse. So the bath is a long, narrow property like this in a valley. And so it's just, there's like a central walkway, and then there's little buildings on either side of the central walkway, all the way, I don't know what length is Tassajara, about maybe a mile long. And the bathhouse is at one end, and the summer student housing is virtually at the opposite end. So it's a long walk in the afternoon, usually, right through the center where the Zendo is, the meditation hall is in the middle. And so I was coming back from the bathhouse, and I was on my way. And this is dinner time. This is dinner afternoon time. So there's a window there specifically for this period of time. It's not that I had an appointment to get to or anything. But I kept thinking to myself, I really want to rest, really want to get a rest before the evening sit. So I got to get back to my room. So I leave the bathhouse and I got my bag of stuff with me, and I'm walking down the trail, and I'm on my way back to, and I'm on my way back to my room. And I stopped and I thought, why am I in a hurry? Right? What is it that is pushing me forward here? What's the stress? What's the stress about? So that I could get back to my room and lie down and rest. Like I'm stressing myself out so that I could get to my room and lie down and rest. And in that moment, it was just so obviously, like nonsensical. Why do that? Why stress myself out? Here I am in beautiful California mountains, living in the monastery. There's no pressure that the next sit is not for another hour and a half. I had this beautiful, beautiful walk ahead of me. And here I am, like rushing back for no reason whatsoever, so that I could, quote unquote, rest. And then I thought to myself, right, so I could just rest while I'm walking. I could actually rest with this next step. I could rest with this next breath. I could rest with the next tree that I walk by. What's keeping me from doing that? Nothing. Just my idea that there's something better to get to. And that is what the true practice of tranquility is asking us to do, is asking us to set down the idea that there's some better place to be right now. And just be here right now. Just be this thing, whatever this thing is, this body and mind. That is what the practice of tranquility is asking you to do. Whether you're on the cushion, whether you're out in the monastery of California, whether you're at your job answering the phone, whatever it is you're doing. So again, that awareness, that wise attention to what is going on in this mind. What is the story that I'm telling myself about needing to be sitting on a different cushion, or to be getting up to take care of that thing on my to-do list, or to be at my cabin when I'm not quite there? Really bringing that attention to our habitual ways of always driving ourselves away from tranquility, away from calm. And one thing that can help on the cushion, so going back to the practice specifically on the cushion, is to talk a little bit about joy. So last week's topic was joy, because that's the fourth factor and the last of the stimulating factors, a specific kind of joy called piti. And piti is said to be the condition, the key condition for the arising of tranquility. So what does that mean? It means that when it's pleasant, it's easy to stay with it, right? When it's pleasant, we're sort of working with the natural tendencies of the mind. So the natural tendency of the mind is we want what's pleasant. We're always craving, we're always grasping after that, more ice cream or whatever it is that you think is pleasant. Right? Generally speaking, these are generalizations. Doesn't always work like that, but a lot of the times, right? And we dislike what's unpleasant, right? So if we if sitting down and meditating is always going to be unpleasant chore, then right, there's going to be that resistance right away. But if we can find a little bit of the pleasantness in it, or at least a neutrality about it, that middle neutrality, yeah, then it's much easier to stay. It's much, much easier. In fact, there was a point at which the Buddha was giving a talk. So this is from the Long Discourses, number 29. The Buddha is giving some instruction to the monastics, and he says, some folks might criticize my followers, you, my followers. Some folks might say that you all are addicted to sense pleasures. And I would say they are indeed, my followers are addicted to the sense pleasure of the first absorption, and to the second absorption, and to the third absorption, and the fourth absorption, to the pleasure of concentration, of meditation. He said, you know what? Stay on it. Keep that up. That is okay. That is a kind of pleasure that if you even became addicted to it, if you even decided that you really want to pursue that till, all the time, it wouldn't harm you at all. It's not bad. It's actually helpful. For most people, it runs out at some point. You eventually learn, you start to see that, yes, even the joy of concentration is impermanent, right? You can't stay in that state forever. There's no such thing. But you can experience joy, even very simple pleasure. So one thing that I sometimes use in my meditation, for example, if I'm doing a meditation on the breath and I'm finding that the mind is too agitated to stay with the breath, does not want to follow. And it's just hopping around and not really attending to the breath. Then one thing that I have found that works for me is that I do something called the sigh. Internally, not externally. I don't bother my fellow meditators with it. But in my mind, I have a little bit of a sigh with the in-breath and the out-breath. So that it just gives it a little flavor of pleasantness. So it's like, ah, ah. That makes it sound kind of funny, and it's not like that. It's more gentle than that. But anyway, it's hard to do out loud because it's just really in my mind. But I do this little bit of a sigh to give the breath a pleasantness and the mind a reason to stay with it, stay with the breath that way. Yeah. Somebody told me that he thinks of his breath, the way that he enters into concentration, or one factor that helps him enter into concentration was thinking of his breath as like drinking honey. I'm like, okay, all right. Ajahn Brahm talks about the bliss breath. He's looking for the bliss breath, So any little bit of pleasantness that you can find with your object of meditation, whether it's the breath or some other object, is helpful. And I'll talk much more in the next week, because next week our topic is these concentration and immersion states, and I can talk much more about how they develop and how the pleasure of those states can really, really just take off. It very, very naturally emerges out of the continuity. So there's that. So if you can find some pleasant aspect of your practice, A lot of people, for example, do a lot of chanting. People who enjoy chanting, they do a lot of chanting. Why? Because it's pleasant, and because, again, you're focusing the mind in a particular way that's helpful to calming everything else that is outside of that chanting, for example. But sometimes the practice is uncomfortable. There's no doubt about that. That is true for everyone. Even folks who can sit for very, very long periods of time, hours and hours. Sometimes the practice is uncomfortable. And there was a time when I had a lot of pain in my knee. I had a tremendous amount of pain in my knee. And I was sitting there and I would think to myself, oh my gosh, my knee is killing me. And then I would think to myself, well, wait, who is the me that's being killed here? Right? Because I'm not dead yet, apparently. So who is the me that is being killed when I think to myself, oh, my knee is killing me? Right? It's just a very unhelpful way of relating to that momentary experience. So I started using different language for it. And even that simple thing, it seems like it's, Pollyanna, perhaps. It seems like it's kind of avoiding the situation. But even just using different language for it, I found helped quite a bit. So I might say to myself, oh, my knee is getting tired. I've been sitting for a long time. So the knee is telling me that it's tired. Or just, unpleasant. Oh, I am noticing that I feel resistance to how unpleasant the knee is. But those kinds of attending to it, this is going back to the difference between wise attention and unwise attention, right? So this way of saying, oh, my knee is killing me, that's unwise attention. It's not a helpful way of looking at it. Looking at it from the wise attention standpoint, then I have more choice, right? I've opened up a different way of relating to it. Ah, right. So if my knee is tired, if the knee is telling me that it's tired by this pain, then I can say, okay, I have a choice, right? Am I going to listen to that tiredness? Am I going to move? Am I going to stop sitting? Am I going to continue for a little while longer? I have a little bit more of a choice of how I'm responding to that and not adding on more aversion to it, more difficulty. And in fact, I think there have also been studies, although I don't have one to point out, but I am pretty sure that there have also been studies that talk about that the more there is aversion and resistance to the pain, the more negativity there is around your pain, the more pain you're likely to have. It just agitates the body, right? That, again, that body-mind connection, that body-mind interaction. So this is going to end again with this idea that part of our practice is to learn this discernment. So we're not forcing ourselves. If my knee is really, really hurting a lot, then I'm not forcing myself to the point of causing harm or feeling like I have to prove that I can sit for 2 hours instead of 1.5 hours or 1 hour and 45 minutes. So the difference between forcing yourself, again, which is a harmful, unskillful, unwholesome quality of mind, right? This kind of harshness to yourself, that's actually, in a sense, kind of unethical. If we think about Buddhist ethics, is about this attitude of non-harming. Yeah. So that applies to our treatment of ourselves too. So not forcing yourself in the harmful, but also perhaps learning to find ease even with something that is unpleasant, or learning to find ease even in the face of a habitual mind that tends to want to stress or put pressure, right? Learning to find ease maybe among other people who aren't so easeful. All kinds of different ways that we also learn that this question of attention and choice can help us to deal with the unpleasantness of life. In fact, again, going back to the Buddha's teachings on this, the very first discourse, according to the early Buddhist tradition, the Theravada tradition holds it, the very first discourse was the Buddha explaining the Four Noble Truths. And the first truth he says is, there is dukkha, there is this unsatisfactoriness, suffering, pain, difficulty, however you want to translate that word, in life. And what is it that he tells us is our task relative to that? It is to understand it. Not to push it away, not to hug it and identify with it for dear life, right? But to actually understand it. So my last bit here is a quote from Bhante Gunaratana. Bhante Gunaratana is a Sri Lankan monk. I think he turned 95 last year. I was there for his birthday party last year. He's still chugging along there. Out in West Virginia, not far from the vihara here, actually, about an hour and a half. And he's written a good many books, the most famous of which is Mindfulness in Plain English. And so I have a little quote from that book for you, because Bhante speaks about this, about tranquility. He says, sitting through restlessness, so the opposite of tranquility, right? Sitting through restlessness is a little breakthrough in your meditation career. It will teach you much. You will find that agitation is actually a rather superficial mental state. It is inherently ephemeral. It comes and it goes. It has no real grip on you at all. Agitation is actually a rather superficial mental state. It has no real grip on you at all. Thank you.